This episode of Nuff Said is brought to you by Tweaked Audio. To get awesome headphones, go to tweakedaudio.com and use the coupon code Southgate to get 30% off, free shipping, and a lifetime warranty. Or you can get there through the link on our website, southgatemediagroup.com.
In a world of gods and monsters, capes and lunatics, one agency stands above it all to protect the humanity of the planet. It is an odd assortment of humans, inhumans, aliens, and time travels. They are the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., and this is Nuff Said. Hi, this is Charlie Esser, Charlie the Professor Esser, your host, and with me as always is my skinny rich friend.
It's Mozz.
Hey, Mozz, welcome to Season 7, Episode 1, the final season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Tonight's episode is The New Deal. Coulson and the agents are thrust backwards in time and stranded in 1931 New York City. With an all-new Zephyr set to time jump at any moment, the team must hurry to find out exactly what happened. Kevin Tencherian is our director on this. Of course, Stan Lee and Jack Kirby are again getting our based on Marvel Comics by credit. Joss Whedon, Jed Whedon, and Marissa Tencherian. Oh, I wonder if Kevin is her brother. Created this episode, or created this series, George Kitson. Good old George Kitson.
Hey.
He's back. He gets our written by. And then Mark Leitner is our story editor, and George Kitson, he is the executive story editor because, you know, he has to keep Mark in his place. Just to remind him, there's a pecking order. All right, so this is interesting. We come into the past, of course. And we get our little opening scene with the cops and the Chronoton hunters. And actually, Phil reminded me something about this, which is when they remove the faces, which you know,
unnecessary.
Which was unnecessary. Yeah, it really seemed unnecessary. You know, it's
completely silly.
You know, it kind of reminded me of, like, in that scene where, you know, Loki carves out the guy's eye just so they could get the retinal scan for the thing.
Right, right.
It's like, really? You couldn't have just taken a photograph of it?
Or you know how to shapeshift your eye.
He has Asgardian strength. He could probably rip the door off its hinges, too, you know?
Right.
People forget that about Loki. Just because Hulk tosses him around, he actually has, you know, the strength of a baby frost giant. So he's actually... But anyway, yeah. It seemed unnecessary. But something that Phil had pointed out was that blank face look, that is something that I guess a lot of characters in the Time Variance Authority have. And... since there is the fan theory, mark my words, that this is going to end with the Time Variance Authority and our Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. becoming a part of that, and that's going to lead into the Loki series. I'm curious about if that was really an Easter egg that Phil saw, or if it is just, you know, some random thinking on the subject. But of course, we get that everyone has come back in time. They know they're in their 30s now. They give their explanation of time travel, which is also, it's neat because it is time travel, but a completely different way than we saw in Endgame. And I like that in a lot of ways. One is because there's more than one way to do things, which is, I think, one of the most true realities of these universes. One of the things I liked that they did this in Star Trek Next Generation, although I think they might have done a bit, mentioned it in other iterations of Star Trek, that not every species develops their light speed engines the same way. Because I believe, like, I think it's Romulans use a stable, essentially a stable black hole as the thing that powers their ships. They've got like a little tiny black hole. And so not everybody's using the dilithium crystal warp drives, but they're getting the same effect. You know, they're getting that faster than light travel, just using a different method. In this case, what it seems like they're doing is they're navigating the time stream, and they actually even make that time stream reference. And there's certain jump points. There are these points in time that you can go to, and you can enter these points in time so that you can have an effect. And
so now, is it because they can only travel to these points in time, or if they want to have an effect, these are the more convenient times to go to? Because much like what's his name says, that it's like the dam effect. Little ripples are fine, but if the dam breaks open, then those are those points in the flow of time that you should go visit if you're looking to change something.
Well, and my take on this was that the points in time are fixed. And in fact, it's interesting because they say something in this that they actually don't say in the episode. In the description of this, they say the team must hurry to find out exactly what happened. It's set to, because they say the Zephyr is set to time jump at any moment, meaning that they have a window, which they never mentioned in this episode, but apparently we're going to find out there's a window. They have only so much time because obviously there's a point you can get in and a point you can get out. And this is actually, so this was something that was
so they're like bus stops or like train stations. You can't get off before.
And the idea is that what they want to do, what everybody wants, because so as an example, and this goes into the entire Endgame question, you know, how did Captain America go back in time but stay in the universe? And the idea is well, because once he went back in time, he must have not made, you know, he could make his small ripples, but he couldn't make big ripples.
Right.
Now, the problem with that is that obviously if you have Captain America in the past, first off, I don't believe that he morally would allow himself not to make ripples because, you know, he can't.
Right.
I mean, I think he's way too moral to do that. But at the same time, I think that there are other aspects of the story that you know, that are real too, which is that once you make enough of a ripple, that is going to create a divergence. And if you have Captain America and Peggy Carter in this time field for this entire time, that is going to ripple something. That is going to break the time stream. So whether or not that's exactly what happens or not, I don't know. But we're going to have to see where it goes from there. But the idea is that you can go back in time. You have fixed points from which you can jump from, apparently. And within these points, what the Chronotons want to do is pull the thread. Because what the Chronotons want to do is they want to keep S.H.I.E.L.D. from being a threat. And that's an interesting point in this. They don't want to necessarily prevent S.H.I.E.L.D. from existing because that would be a big ripple. And suddenly this becomes a completely different divergent timeline, and although they could conquer that timeline, they don't want to. It would like defeat the purpose of getting back to where they're from, and you know that's where you get a paradox, because if you create that alternate timeline, then the timeline you go to isn't going to have the events that you're waiting for. If you get what I'm saying,
right.
So you want to go back to your own timeline. But now the time has changed so that everything has happened as it should have happened, but S.H.I.E.L.D. is not the threat that you want it to be. So as we've uncovered in this, the way they're going to do this is by not allowing Hydra to become the power. Now, there's a counter argument in that if you don't have that counterbalance in Hydra, maybe S.H.I.E.L.D. gets even more powerful. But they believe, because of the thousands of years of history that the anthropologists have recorded on humanity, they can figure where they can pull the strings to pull the threads where it is going to create just enough of a difference so that they can win in the end. And the similar example of this is this idea at the end of last season when they do go back in time. When they finally get back to the regular time stream and, what's her name? Quake, Chloe Bennett, realizes rather than to shoot herself with the serum, she shoots Graviton with the serum, and that changes the perspective so that he doesn't tear the Earth apart. He actually, flies off into space. But of course, because of the time jump, that's an interesting question.
What?
Chronotons are robots.
Right.
Would robots be taken out in the snap?
They didn't say. It said living things, not sentient.
Yeah.
Or did it say sentient things?
No, it's living things because there's lots of non-sentient things. Because he killed half the trees in the universe. Which, how does that help?
Right.
Thanos was wrong. Let's just get that out of the way. Thanos was
all right,
wrong.
so robots probably survived the snap.
Yeah, so all the Chronotons were fine after the snap. But so as this plays out, we have, speaking of robots, because I forgot to mention, there's also a robot here because we have Coulson back in LMD form. And this is interesting because, of course, when they first turn him on, he starts to essentially break down. I think they had a previous save version of Coulson, and then they needed to upload, all the experience he has had up till this moment so that he can be relevant and useful to their tactical situation. And so when he steps out, he's downloading all this information, all these experiences, and it's like he's going and living through them in that moment. Yeah, and what I think is
that was pretty cool.
Oh, it was cool. I'm not gonna deny that it was cool. It was absolutely cool. But what I think is interesting about it is that, well, of course, it is certainly cool, and it is certainly interesting. It's also problematic in the sense that it's not what happened to him. And let me put it to you this way. So they have
the memories they implanted in him are their suppositions of what happened, but not maybe.
Well, essentially they're data points.
Huh.
So, and this is the idea. Coulson died.
Right.
But he doesn't. He just knows. Oh, I died. And in fact, the way he says it is, "Oh, I died." But really, his brain stopped at the framework. Huh. So everything that they've put into his brain since then, it's literally just like if you were reading it out of a book. So these are and as an example,
he looked like he was experiencing them in the moment,
Well,
like just like flooding his brain really, really fast, and we're just catching moments of him as he's flowing through that stream.
Yeah, but what I'm going to say is what it comes into is, I don't think his emotional attachment to those moments are as profound as the moments that are from his life. And I think that's sort of because, for example, actually, no, that was after the framework, but when he goes into the whole thing about I'm dead anyway, that's just, it's like if he was watching a movie of his life, and it's emotional and it's tearing. Right. Partially because he already died once. And I think that's what it is. He sees, I died, and they brought me back. And then I was dying again, and then I'm being brought back. And it's sort of this idea of is this never going to end? Is this never going to have? Is this going to cycle forever? Are they never going to let me die? You know. And then he knows that someone else was running around with his face for a while. You know, and then also that he is technically running around with his face. That
right.
He is really, and this I think is something we're going to get evolved into, is he is not Phil Coulson. He is something with Phil Coulson's face that thinks it's Phil Coulson. And that
or is asked to fill the role of Phil Coulson, making no obligations to him to be Phil Coulson, but you have to pretend to be and fill that role for right now. You have your own journey and your right to walk it and figure out who you are. And, you know, you have the right to do that. But in this moment, we need you to act like Phil Coulson.
Well, and what it is he only knows that he is Phil Coulson, but he also knows that he is an LMD. And it is this, you know, it is a weird esoteric, you know, evolution as a character. It's a concept that is very complex, but
must be so much fun to play as an actor.
Oh yeah, I mean, I am certain that Clark Gregg is really loving this moment. I know he's gonna miss this character. Yeah. If this character goes away at the end, because this character may not, you know.
They might just adding more and more layers to it.
That's there was one of those cryptic interview comments where they were talking to, you know, about this season, and they're saying, so do you think in this season, you know, are you going to bump up against the rest of the Marvel Cinematic Universe? And like, oh yeah, there's a bump. Yeah, we bump right up against it, you know, and just, it's like, what does that mean? We don't know yet, but it's something. We know it's going to be something. But one of the things I wanted to touch on is this idea of, so in the comics, there's a character named Max Fury. And Max Fury was essentially an LMD of Nick Fury that gained sentience. And essentially, this is a problem they have with LMDs a lot in S.H.I.E.L.D., where they get to be so perfect that they eventually start to think they're the real version of themselves. And then, you know, because, you know, you're the rogue version of Nick Fury, what do? You go out and blow up Hydra bases. But unfortunately, you know, there were Hydra bases that weren't scheduled for demolition yet, as the joke goes. And so they have to keep on chasing down these rogue Nick Fury bots. And then one of them actually gets out of it and breaks the cycle. He realizes he is an LMD, realizes that he's not Nick Fury, and then essentially has to create his own identity, and he becomes Max Fury. And he's, you know, and then he has his own journey. And I think that I get the feeling that because, as we see at the end of this episode, May, of course, you know, May was, you know, mortally wounded, but they are rebuilding her.
Quote unquote.
Yeah, they're fixing her. You know, they get her to a proper core temperature, then they just start knitting her back together. Much in the same way that we saw them do that with Hawkeye in Age of Ultron, where they're using that, you know, micro synthezoid material to essentially sew him back together.
Right.
But this on a much more, you know, obviously advanced scale. But of course, what happens is that clearly May wakes up. May, you know, and if you're May and you wake up in a tube, first thought is, how do I get out of this tube?
Right.
And then we see that she is, you know, we see at the end she's like, you know, doing the whole ninja, you know, stay on top of the ceiling thing. Yeah. Yeah, which is cool. Which is very
so
cool.
now, is there something wrong with her mind too? Is she so scarred from wherever she was on the other side, or does she not recognize her team and is so suspicious that she's hiding? What do you think her intentions are there?
I think it could be a lot of different things, but I actually think that, first off, she doesn't know the situation. So she just woke up in a tube.
Right, but these are your friends. These are your team. What are you hiding for?
Does she, you know, or are these people with their faces? because we've just went through a whole thing with people.
Right, but she has no idea about that. She just woke up. Her last memories are from last season.
I know, where there was someone else running around with Coulson's face.
Oh, that's right. I guess so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Huh,
and
all
just
right.
part of that, there were a bunch of LMDs, and whatever was going on, she was locked in a tube that she had to figure out how to get
So that
out of.
means she can be talked down. She's not crazy. She's not going to try to kill everybody.
I'm assuming.
If there's a reasoned plea made to her.
Yeah, I don't think. In fact, I think that's one of those. I think that's intended to be a cliffhanger, or that's meant to be the comic cover.
Yeah.
If you ever, if you read the hard comics, you'll always have some really dramatic scene on the cover that's supposed to entice you to read it. But then that is a scene or something similar that exists in the book, but then it's also kind of misleading because what happens next is. She goes, "Oh, it's you guys." It's like the next scene, like the sort of next episode could be, we're playing that, and then all of a sudden she just hops down and says, "Oh, Enoch, it's you. What's going on?" Because when she got up in the rafters, Enoch wasn't there. She just knew someone had locked her in a tube in what might be something similar to the Zephyr, but it's all super differently high-teched up. Something strange is going on here. So,
Yeah.
So yeah, it might be her, and I think that's going to be one of the stories that we're going to see play out in this, with the idea of Coulson and May having to deal with this thing, and I think that's where we're going to get Max. We're going to get Max Coulson in this. I think Coulson is going to, when they confront each other, I think there's going to be a lot of bad blood, and I think Coulson's going to say, "Look, I'm not going to say that you and I don't have that. I don't feel what I felt, but I know that I'm not him. I know you've been through a lot of things, so just understand I'm not him, and I know I'm not him.
Yeah,
but
I just got him.
Yeah. I am still me, and and if it makes it easier, just just call me Max. I'm not Coulson, I'm Max. And that's how we're going to get our Max Coulson. That's my hope. That's the scene I'm hoping exists. I don't know if it will, but it would be awesome if it did. Or something, they don't have to use Max, because maybe now that, oh man, he said it was Max, now everyone's going to know it. So I'll say that he's going to go by his middle name, is Sylvester. Yeah, just call me Phil. Yeah, or whatever.
Phil
Son of Cole. But we get Patton Oswald in this.
Oh, that was great. That was quite a nice surprise.
Yes. And I love that, of course, not only do all of the other Konings look like that, this apparently Konings breed true. All the Konings, except for the daughters, look exactly like Patton Oswald. And they're all like quintuplets. Although I'm guessing maybe they reproduce exponentially, because now they're called Gemini, the twins, but maybe by they're triplets, and so the next group of Konings are triplets. So that theoretically, if this follows suit, if all the Konings from the original Koning, the first one, who's probably from like the 1800s, who had twins, and then each of his children had quadruplets and then octuplets.
Wow.
In succeeding generations, but then of course each of the twins has an octuplet, and each, that kind of thing, then
you could study their genome and save humanity at some point.
Well, or just everyone looks like Patton Oswalt in the future.
Yeah. It's not a great feature.
It's Patton Oswald. It's Patton Oswald, not Patton Oswald. But yes, I don't know why I was putting a T for a D there for some reason. And we get Freddie Malik, because old man Malik, I'm guessing lost a lot of money in the stock market, from what it suggests, because it said he went out that window. So all his debts were paid when he went out that window, which suggests that the Maliks were rich. Then they lost all their money. I'm wondering if we're going to get what was his name? The evil SHIELD agent from the first season. Why am I blanking on his name now? Sky had a thing for him, and he went a little, but his family was like rich and famous. I wonder if we're gonna get some references to them at some point. But yeah, maybe we'll bring him back too, because it's always fun whenever you go back in time. All of your ancestors should look exactly like you. Anyway, but yeah, so we save the Hydra agent in there. We're going to get her some medical care because she got shot after she hands the stuff off to Freddy. Although it looks like he only got one of the vials, because it looks like the other 4 vials got dropped, and he just had one vial of what looks to be a super soldier serum, or at least a prototype. Oh, it's blue liquid, and we always assume blue liquid is a super soldier serum.
Gotcha. I thought it was green. But of course it would be super soldier liquid.
Yeah. Well, actually, interestingly enough, in the very first Agent Carter short, and maybe they're going to tie into that first Agent Carter short in this. In that first Agent Carter short, they actually had her sort of getting something called Zodiac. And when she finds Zodiac, the Zodiac formula, it actually looks like super soldier serum. It's, again, this little amorphous or the translucent blue liquid. So it's an interesting aspect of this. Maybe that is what we're looking at here, or maybe that's going to tie into the Zodiac. Maybe they're going to tie in that Agent Carter short into this. We're actually going to get that Agent Carter short wrapped into this, because we do know Sousa's coming back, and he's not here yet. So I get the feeling we're going to get into this whole evolution of SSR to S.H.I.E.L.D., and we're probably going to get more Agent Carter in this. We're going to get Sousa. We might get Agent Carter in the 60s.
That'd be fun.
Maybe Ant-Man in the 80s. And maybe even figure out what went on with Steve Rogers and Agent Carter in that whole scenario.
Yeah, so like this, the Agent Carter, going back to that, what we're seeing in that series is whatever hasn't been changed yet. So it's the old timeline, right? Before Captain America gets back and it's all changed and irrelevant.
Well, I don't know because if we're assuming Cap goes back in the 60s, then that's before.
So that means Agent Carter is old and Captain America is young?
Well, no.
30 years from the 30s, right?
Yeah. Well, right now, it'd be 30 years. So essentially, and I think the idea is that by 2019, from 1945, that puts you into that time when they showed up. So essentially, he'd been in the future as long as she's been going through the past. So that if they reconnect in 1964, or whenever it is they went back to, they're actually about the same chronological age.
So Carter travels forward in time?
Well, we all travel forward in time.
No, at an expedited pace.
No. So at the end of in 1945 is when their first story ends. When Cap goes back and sees Peggy Carter in Endgame, that's sometime in the 1960s. Probably about 1963 or 1964. So within that concept, which is ironically in standard Marvel continuity, when Cap actually does first come out of the ice. So
wow.
It's an interesting way that you can look at it. So, like, to me, if he goes back to be with Agent Carter, he's going to break that timeline and just go off on his own and have his
Unless
own.
There's already a Captain America in that timeline.
Well, that's always that thing. That's sort of the thing that I feel about it. I kind of feel like that's sort of the idea that if Cap were to go back in time, like that was actually always my big thing on that. Wasn't that Cap went back in time, that Cap went back in time and got himself out of the ice so he could be with Agent Carter. And then, if you want to create that time loop, what happens is he goes into the ice to be found by S.H.I.E.L.D. several years later. But then he has all of his memories of the future. none of it really ever works right. Unless maybe they're like, if they want to do a real explainer. The real explainer that you can do with this is that Cap gets himself out of the ice, brings him to Peggy, explains to everybody what's going on, does some kind of mind wipey, maybe goes to the Ancient One and says, I understand that I want you to do a mind wipe on me. I want you to put me in the ice so that the Avengers pull me back out. And then puts himself puts himself into a constant time loop. That's my fan theory, that the Captain America from Endgame is just going to be in a forever time loop. And the Captain America we see at the end of Endgame isn't necessarily the same Captain America. That's the Captain America that gets pulled out of the ice early and lives his life. Maybe has a few small adventures with Agent Carter, but never the one that opens up everything. And so, this idea of creating this time loop, the structure is what he says. That's what I have to do. Not that I'm going to sacrifice myself, but that I'm going to let myself have what I never got to have, and I'm going to sacrifice myself for myself, and I'll be in this forever time loop.
Wow.
Yeah, that's my take on it. I don't know if it's true, but I like that idea. And we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Anyway, but yeah, so we've pretty much unlocked everything in this episode that we got. It's exciting. I'm really excited to see the next episode. Do you have any final thoughts on tonight's episode, Mozz?
Also, what's it? Yo-Yo getting her hands back? That I thought was interesting and worth noting.
Oh yeah,
she makes an interesting comment, like she wants to be herself, but for so long she's not been herself, and denied herself her human touch and feelings. So I think it's a faulty thing to think in that moment, and she recognizes it when she gets her hands back. She's like, oh, this whole time maybe I wasn't myself, and now I can finally actually be myself.
Well, I think that's very much a part of it, but I think a little bit further into that is this idea that she doesn't want to act like what happened didn't happen.
Right.
She doesn't want to ignore that she went through what she went through. She wants to come out of this aware that, this happened, these things occurred, and I went through it. And I don't want to deny that this happened. And and in a way, that idea, you put on the nice-looking arms, and you're kind of denying that it ever happened. But really, you're not
denying, but denying its power over you.
Well, yeah. I mean, what it comes down to, and it is, this is a very big, complex issue in the disability rights community. In fact, I am sure there is a message board that went. I don't know. Do message boards still exist? I don't know. So? I'm sure there's a Reddit thread somewhere that is full of a lot of very opinionated people about whether or not what this choice means and what the depth of it is. People, because you have this issue with cochlear ear implants. Where that we actually we can do things that help. Of course, we've been helping the deaf hear for years. We've had hearing aids, we've had things of this nature. But, the cochlear implant was kind of a game changer in that industry. And it kind of creates this thing where it's like, well, it's great if you can get it, but if not, now you're saying that, that there is something basically, it's a very complex issue about cultures that exist within communities that have a shared struggle. And so if you are a deaf person, and when everyone is deaf, we all have this idea that, we are worth something to create and all these kind of things. And when people start getting rid of their disabilities, suddenly are you saying that we're no longer acceptable? Is this wiping out who we are as people? And does this mean that in the future there won't be people who suffer, who share in this struggle? And does that mean we lose an insight that struggle has given us?
Well, yeah, but you can take that insight and move forward and grow. It's the active fighting back against growth that's, I think, interesting to me. And what it seems like, at least in some situations, is a fetishizing of victim culture. You choose to make yourself a victim, and if you can't be a victim anymore, how deeply was that a part of your identity that it makes you uncomfortable that you can't claim victimhood anymore?
No, but I think there is I think that's one reading of it, and I think that is a not. I do not think that is a wrong reading of the question, but I think at the same time there is an aspect of it that says, it's the was it Gattaca issue, where if we put ourselves in this position where we're going to say, we feel that, only this is the acceptable way to be, then everything else becomes seen as less than. Because as I say, the thing with the cochlear implant is, yes, it works for some people. It doesn't work for everybody. And now people that were in this world now suddenly get pulled out of this world, and it's a choice to get pulled out of this world, although some people never get the chance to be in the world that they were born to in that sense. So, for example, when you give a child a cochlear ear implant, because as a parent you want your child to hear, you were essentially saying to every other deaf person that, I don't, that being deaf is a unacceptable thing to be.
Yeah, but that's a narrative that they're not necessarily making. They're just trying to help their child. And if you're choosing to adopt that as their narrative, I think that's unfair to those people that you're attributing that narrative to. And I think it says something about you if you're willing to adopt that narrative simply because you think it might exist out there, rather than having, the strength of your own identity or character.
And I don't necessarily disagree with you, but as I said, the idea is that it can start with one thing and quickly progress to other things. So, eventually it becomes, no, all children should have blue eyes, and although, as my mom always said, and this is actually kind of an interesting, my mom always used to say, you're never going to have that world where everyone's the same, because if you have curly hair, you usually want your kids to have curly hair. If you have brown eyes, you want your kids to have brown eyes. You don't necessarily want your kids to be starkly different. And there is actually scientific evidence that we will actually maintain genetic diversity even as we change the way we approach our own genetics, and that is via circumcision. That the choice to circumcise, which is very much a choice every parent makes about their sons, every male makes about their child. And at the end of the day, what they have found is that people who are circumcised tend to choose to have their children circumcised. People who aren't circumcised tend to choose to have their children circumcised, or tend to choose to not have their children circumcised. That basically whatever you have, you want your child to match you. Right. So within that structure, the idea that humans will start to say, I don't want my kid to be like me, that seems, I think, less and less likely based on what we can see in the areas that we do have those choices. Now, that said, people still get nose jobs all the time. And, although, again, I think that because that's an interesting cultural quality, maybe some people get nose jobs, but I think a lot of other people never think that's worth the money.
Right.
And so don't, and you can put this all the way back to whether or not you get braces,
Right.
Some families think it's very important that you get braces, and some families do not. I'm not a big believer in braces. But that's also because I have crooked teeth. So maybe if I had nice straight teeth, I'd want my kids to have the same nice straight teeth. And that's the crux of it. And I think that her initial rejection is right. Because, and here's what I think it is. If it's just a cosmetic thing, so if it's basically the same arms, but, now they don't look like robot arms, then it is just cosmetic and it's pretending like it didn't happen. But if they actually are a return to something that's more real,
and more familiar to the rest of her experience.
Exactly. It's like it still happened, and then they are still robot arms. So all
Right.
the problems of having robot arms are still there, as well as all the advantages of having robot arms. And that is, it shows in just a couple of scenes someone able to grow beyond their initial fear of something and then being able to see its advantage and embracing that. We see that same thing with Phil Coulson in this episode where, he goes from the start where it's like, I shouldn't be here, I didn't want this, yada yada, to by the end it's like, this is actually kind of cool,
Yeah.
I'm here, we're both superheroes, which is also kind of like, fanboy Phil getting his dream. It's like, oh, I'm actually a superhero.
Yeah,
I have
and
supreme
I'm
strength.
here. This, as much as I think I don't want to be here, everything's pretty awesome.
Well, yeah, because you know what? That's the thing. It's like you can say I don't want to come back again, but then once you're back, that same idea that says life should have an end also says, but not now.
Yeah.
It's like we say, it's very easy to say someday we will all die. It's another thing to say, okay, and 9:00 tomorrow. Nobody wants to say 9:00 tomorrow. Well, some people do say 9:00 tomorrow, but generally speaking, that's not always that's usually seen as the bad choice, not the good choice.
Yeah.
Just to put my value judgment on it. But generally speaking,
a ball. Like when he has that fight and he punches the pan and dents it, and he goes, "Oh, this is pretty cool. Look what I can do."
oh, yeah.
He has a ball.
Yeah, exactly. It's fun for Phil. He does his fanboying of Franklin Delano Roosevelt. That's awesome too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. It's like you can. I really think they wrote this season. I think this is going to be Clark Gregg's season. Not like they weren't all Clark Gregg's season, but I really think this is going to be a great time for Clark Gregg to have it. I really think this is going to be such a fond farewell to the series, and I think it is going to be bringing everyone back into the fold of agents of bringing the agents back into the fold of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I think by the end of this, we're going to really have everybody back in one place, and everyone's going to basically clean up any loose threads that were left at the end of Endgame, so that when we go forward, we're going to see what we're going to do. And it would not surprise me if we don't get a couple of Netflix characters in this at some point.
Ooh, that would be interesting.
Yeah, well, I do think, and I know everyone will be mad about this, but I think Iron Fist was like the first to go, so he's technically the first that'll show up.
We'll never get rid of that stain.
No, you know what? You have to. Sometimes you just have to embrace the ridiculousness.
I guess.
That's the thing. You can never blame the actor for the story that he's in, and you can never, and you can't. Yeah, well, you can't. Hey, we all need to eat,
True, but I mean, maybe they could have found an actor that could have delivered those same lines with a bit more credibility, with a bit more believability. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that's always the question. Well, they could always recast him and still be within continuity. They can always Darren him, Dick Sargent him, or Jerome Krebs him.
Or the guy playing Red Skull.
Yes. And the new Red Skull, I liked it. I hope we get the new Red Skull back. And I think, which is that other theory that actually Cap didn't go into, didn't actually go back in time. That actually where he did is when he met the Red Skull and he put the Soul Stone back. He actually went into the Soul Stone and spent essentially his time with Peggy in the Soul Stone. And when he comes back at the end, after living a full life with Peggy in the Soul Stone, which could have been thousands of years or something, he might have lived the same life over and over again. Then he came back just because he had to give the shield back, So it's an interesting possibility. There's lots of theories out there, and we're going to explore them all, at least as long as this Enough Said runs. We'll have to decide what we do after this season ends. Okay. Mozz, well, before we do that, let's take a moment to thank our glorious sponsors, including Hunt a Killer. Yes, if you'd like to hunt a killer, one of our sponsors is Hunt a Killer. And they will send you clues to help you piece together a murder of some sort that, is hard to figure out. But, the clues are there. You just got to put them together. You got to do a little work. You got to do your homework. When you're home alone right now, do a little homework. And if that's a little mentally taxing, what you can also do is go down into our website, go down to our show notes, find that link to Amazon. And in Amazon, you can find any number of, lower stress things to do, including finding Pod Life the book, which is available both for the Kindle and in an actual old school hardcover, well, not hardcover, but it might be hardcover, I don't know, the actual hard copy book of it. And while you're there, you can pick up some Tweaked Audio headsets, which you can then listen to this show and get that full, crisp, clear quality of what our podcasts are. Because, if you want to hear us in our full vocal range, you really should get some Tweaked Audio headsets. This is sponsored, yes. This is sponsored. They are a sponsor of the Southgate Media Network. Well, I don't get paid, but someone does. I do it for the love of the game, Tristan. I do it for the love of the game. Okay, and in the meantime, Mozz, if people would like to write to you to find out how your love of the game is going, where can they find you?
Well, they can email me at mozzmanzor@gmail.com or find me on Facebook under Mozz Manzor. That's MOZZMANZOOR.
And, of course, you can always write to me in that old-fashioned email way the way our Mozz and Poz once did at superconnectivityblog@gmail.com. That's superconnectivityblog, all one word, at gmail.com. Of course, follow me on the Twitter as I live tweet Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. I promise I'll stay up and do it next time. At Charlie Esser, that's CharlieEsser. Look for the two E's in the middle.
For quality. Bing!
Thank you, Mozz. All right, ladies and gentlemen. You have listened once again to the harrowing exploits of the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Until next week when we come again, we just have to say, enough said.